Welcome back, folks, and to the newcomers, thank you for showing up. And we will continue where we left off on part two. Less than a month before the GOP met for its national convention in San Francisco, organizers Andrew Goodman, James Chaney, who was a black man born and raised in Mississippi, and Michael Schwimmer had been kidnapped on a back road in Neshoba County. The only hint that they existed was Schwimmer's charred Ford station wagon. The media attention that followed the man's disappearance riled the entire South. Their bodies would be found in early August, buried in the shallow earthenworks of a dam. Then 2 weeks, who had the ability to bury bodies in a shallow part of a dam? Oh, God. Then 2 weeks after the men's disappearance and mere days before the GOP convention opened, Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act into law, making discrimination in public venues illegal. Public venues. Did you get what I'm saying? Did you get what I'm dropping down? Supporters of the presumed front-runner, liberal New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller were blindsided by the party's well-organized conservative wing, which nominated Arizona's senator Barry Goldwater. His name was Mr. Conservative. Goldwater can be seen as the godfather or maybe the midwife of the current Tea Party. He wanted the federal government out of the state's business. Of course they did. He believed the Civil Rights Act was unconstitutional. Of course he thought it was unconstitutional, but old Barry didn't believe that or didn't think that denying people their basic rights and humanity and dignity wasn't unconstitutional, right? Just slaughtering folks and threatening to take their jobs and destroy their communities and lives, that wasn't unconstitutional. Although he said that once it had been enacted into law, it would be obeyed, but states, he said, should implement the law in their own time. Many white Southerners, especially segregationists, felt reassured by Goldwater's words. Of course they did. And they could choose when they were gonna respect men and women's rights. They had a choice. How many of us have a choice to decide when we're going to respect someone's rights? Black Americans heard the message that was intended to be heard, which was that Goldwater and the Goldwater wing of the Republican Party were opposed not only to the Civil Rights Act, but to the civil rights movement in large part as well. When Goldwater, in his acceptance speech, famously told the ecstatic convention, "Extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice." He was speaking of a very specific notion of liberty, says P. Now Joseph. Small government, a government that doesn't give out handouts to black people. Here we go again. The hypocrisy is unbelievable. Here's my personal input. Handouts to black folks, huh? Guess they didn't get the memo. Can we say 1863 Homestead Act? So in other words, other people can get handouts. No, they wouldn't be called handouts. It would be called looking out for doing a greater good, or this would be we're doing this for the greater good of mankind, excluding black Americans. The Homestead Act was one of many handouts given to Europeans and European Americans. Some white people's mentalities, the lack of accountability, and the denial of how they've built their empires can blow one's mind, right? Let's continue. The old, foolish, pompous one continues his verbal assault. I'm talking about Waterman. Or Goldwater. I don't know why I keep saying Waterman. A government that doesn't have laws that interfere with states' rights. A government that is not conducting a war on poverty. It was a signal both sides heard loud and clear. Goldwater attracted the white Southern votes, the white Southern racist votes his advisors thought were essential, paving the way for the Southern strategy that Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan would use successfully in later years. I think I'm going to do a video on Ronald Reagan, old slick, sly, racist, sorry bastard. I said exactly how I meant it. When he got into office, he discontinued a lot of vocational programs that were really good in helping, that really benefited the black community. I know a lot of black people who used those vocational programs and ended up getting a lot of good jobs through those programs, and just all kind of programs that was set in place to help black America. He discontinued it. That he was a rotten governor, and he was a rotten president, and anyone that praises this president, Ronald Reagan, even to this day, I already know what you're about. The rest of the black Republican voters exit stage right after Goldwater made let it be known what he was all about. It was an abrupt shift, says Hutchinson, for the relatively few but still not trivial fractions of blacks. They moved aggressively and in one accord and dipped out of the Republican Party and went to the Democratic Party. Black voters have stayed there in increasing numbers ever since. Not all of them want to be there. Not all black voters who are Democrat want to be Democrat, but they figure, well, I'd rather be a Democrat than a Republican. I get it now. I completely understand. I don't like it, but I understand. As a result of intimidation, violence, and racial discrimination in state voting laws, a mere 3% of voting age black men and women in the South were registered to vote in 1940. In Mississippi, under 1% were registered. Most blacks who did vote lived in the larger cities in the South. By not having the power of the ballot, black people in the South had little influence in their communities. They did not hold elected offices. They had no say in how much their taxes would be or what laws would be passed. They had little, if any, control over local police, courts, or public schools. They, in effect, were denied their rights as citizens. Sound familiar? Isn't that what they're attempting to do again? Black folks specifically need to sue the hell out of Mississippi. Attempts to change the situation were met with animosity and outright violence again. White folks, you guys are good with committing violence when you want to, right? But let some black folks burn down some businesses and riot. Riot is a voice they're using when they're not being heard. But you guys just committed violence just for the hell of it. Just because somebody wanted to exercise their right, that was your alternative. Committing violence to stop someone from exercising their rights. Attempts to change the situation were met with animosity and outright violence. But who's always accused of being violent? In the 1950s, the civil rights movement developed. Facing enormous hostility, black people in the South organized to determine their rights guaranteed in the Constitution. They launched voter registration drives in many Southern communities. On March 7, 1965, about 600 black and white civil rights protesters passed through Selma and began to cross the Ammon-Pettus Bridge, spanning the Alabama River. They were met on the other side by a large force of Alabama state troopers who ordered the marchers to return to Selma. When the marchers refused to turn back, the troopers attacked, some on horseback, knocking down people and beating them with clubs. This was all filmed by TV news cameras and shown that evening to a shocked American public. What good is your shock if it's not going to change much? You could be shocked all day long, but look around, nothing has much changed. The Selma March pushed the federal government to pass legislation to enforce the right of Black American citizens to vote. A few days after the violence in Selma, President Lyndon Johnson introduced the Voting Rights Act of 1965 before a joint session of Congress. Johnson declared it is not just Negroes, but it's really all of us who must overcome the crippling legacy of bigotry and injustice. You don't say. The Voting Rights Act, signed into law by President Johnson on August 6, 1965, suspended literacy and other tests in counties and states showing evidence of voter discrimination. These counties and states also were prohibited from creating new voter requirements that deny citizens their right to vote. Moreover, in the areas covered by the act, federal examiners replaced local clerks in registering voters. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 ended the practices that had denied Black Americans the right to vote in southern states. Registration of Black voters in the South jumped from 43% in 1964 to 66% by the end of the decade. This represented an increase of more than 1 million new Black American voters who could finally claim their right to vote. Here's my conclusion. In the words of Langston Hughes, Negroes, sweet and docile, meek, humble, and kind, beware the day they change their mind. You know, it's only the hand of God that has kept his children, aka Black Americans, the true Hebrews, from doing things that I don't think anyone's mind can conceive could be done to those who have intentionally done just about everything imaginable to interfere with their right, liberty, happiness, the right to live your life in peace. God said he is an avenger. He sees. Lord Jesus Christ, God sees. Remember that when you want to go out there and do what's been done to you and your ancestors, let him take care of it. Let him take care of your oppressors. Sit back, grab a bag of popcorn, sit back and watch the show. That's it, and that's all, folks. And to those who don't believe God is real, don't exist, okay, he a big sky babe. Some people say sky daddy. Okay, I'm not even talking to you. If that's what you want to believe, if that's what you truly believe in your heart, mind, soul, and spirit, I'm not even referencing you. I'm talking to the ones who know God is real. He's more real than the air you breathe. Just sit back. It's only a matter of time, because the seeds these hateful people are planting is nowhere in the world they're not going to reap it. It's happening now. I think a lot of things that are happening from the seeds they're planting, they have cleverly and quietly kept them from the public. But it's going to be a point where they can't keep hiding it. It's just going to come bursting out like a volcano. You can't hide a tsunami. You can't hide an earthquake. Okay, people, thank you for your time. If you like what you heard, leave a comment, subscribe, check out my other content. I try to upload videos regularly. And thanks again. Have a great day.